The heavy oak doors of Courtroom 26B swung open as Pam Bondi stepped inside, head held high, her legal binder clutched in one hand. Her tailored navy suit was sharp, her demeanor even sharper. The room, buzzing with murmurs, turned their eyes toward her. At the front of the courtroom sat Judge Paul Engelmayer, known in legal circles for his dry wit, biting sarcasm, and a smug confidence that rarely wavered. Pam's client was a whistleblower from inside a powerful federal agency, and this case had the attention of D.C., the press, and several institutions who would rather it vanish. She took her seat at the plaintiff's table, calm but focused. Across from her, opposing counsel smirked and whispered something that made a few interns chuckle. As the hearing began, Judge Engelmayer interrupted Bondi mid-sentence during her opening argument. "Ms. Bondi," he said, lips curled in a condescending half-smile, "I do hope you're not planning to turn this courtroom into a political theater. We do deal in facts here, not cable news drama." Laughter erupted from the defense table. A few reporters even scribbled down the jab. Pam didn't flinch. She gently closed her binder and looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," she said evenly, "I plan to deal in only one thing, the truth, something this court will have no choice but to confront by the time I finish." The judge chuckled again. But the mood in the courtroom was about to shift. The courtroom settled into a strange silence. Judge Engelmayer, still half amused, gestured for Bondi to continue. "Proceed then, Ms. Bondi. Dazzle us." Pam stood slowly, opened her binder, and placed a single, folded document on the wooden podium in front of her. "This," she said, unfolding the page carefully, "is a sworn affidavit, signed and time-stamped, from a senior legal officer within the agency. It not only confirms that my client followed every lawful reporting channel, but it also directly contradicts the testimony provided under oath by the agency's general counsel, Mr. Frederick Langley." The defense table tensed. The name Langley was not expected. "This affidavit," Pam continued, "has never been made public. It was obtained under seal. And Your Honor, I would strongly advise you read it before dismissing this case as political drama." Judge Engelmayer's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting perjury?" he asked, the smirk finally disappearing. Pam didn't blink. "I'm not suggesting it, Your Honor. I'm proving it." She handed the document to the clerk, who rushed it up to the bench. Engelmayer scanned it, flipping the page, then again. The courtroom watched in breathless silence. Then he looked up, and for the first time since the hearing began, his voice lost its playful tone. "Ms. Bondi, where did you obtain this?" "From a source your chambers once deemed irrelevant." "I asked a better question, and got a real answer." The silence in courtroom 26B had turned heavy. Judge Engelmayer leaned back in his chair, the affidavit still in his hand. His brow was furrowed now, eyes locked on the signature at the bottom of the second page. "You're telling this court that this statement was made before the agency's internal report was finalized?" he asked, his voice now low and taut. Pam nodded. 3 weeks before, Your Honor." And conveniently omitted from discovery by opposing counsel. A low gasp rose from the gallery. Reporters began typing furiously. The defense attorney, a well-known D.C. litigator named Marshall Griggs, stood up abruptly. "Your Honor, we request a recess," Pam cut in, calm but firm. "Objection. The defense is scrambling because their timeline just collapsed. This isn't the time for recess, it's time for reckoning." Judge Engelmayer raised his hand, silencing both of them. "I want both parties in my chambers. Now. Everyone else, 10-minute recess." The gavel hit. As the judge rose and exited, he didn't look at Pam. But his grip on the affidavit said everything. Griggs leaned toward Bondi as they gathered their files. "You really think that document will hold?" he whispered. She didn't even glance at him. "I don't think, Mr. Griggs." "I know." Then she walked toward the judge's chambers, her heels echoing off the marble floor, leaving behind a courtroom no longer laughing. Inside Judge Engelmayer's chambers, the tension was so thick it seemed to mute the very air. Pam Bondi stood tall, her binder closed neatly on the edge of the polished desk. Marshal Griggs fidgeted beside her, his confidence now visibly shaken. Judge Engelmayer took a slow breath, set the affidavit down, and looked up at both of them. Ms. Bondi. If this statement is verified, it undermines not only the defense's testimony, it implies a willful obstruction of the court's discovery process. Pam's tone was razor-sharp but respectful. That's correct, Your Honor. Which means this court has been knowingly misled. I have phone logs, internal emails, and time-stamped communications that confirm the affidavit's authenticity. And I'm prepared to submit all of them. The judge turned toward Griggs. Counselor, do you have an explanation? Griggs swallowed. Your Honor, I was not aware of this document. If it exists, it was never in our possession. Pam slid a flash drive across the desk. Everything is on there. Including metadata showing the document originated inside the agency's legal office and was emailed directly to your clerk's office last month. It was ignored. That landed like a grenade. Judge Engelmayer's eyes narrowed. He picked up the flash drive and stared at it for a moment, the weight of it heavier than its size could explain. I'll review this immediately, he said, voice clipped. If what you've said is accurate, this case may take a very different direction, and several individuals may find themselves in contempt. Pam gave a single nod. That's all I ask. That the law be followed, even when it's inconvenient. As she turned to leave the chamber, Judge Engelmayer didn't stop her. He didn't smirk. He didn't speak. He just sat there, staring at the evidence she dropped like a hammer. When Pam Bondi re-entered the courtroom, the energy had shifted. The once snide glances from reporters were now replaced with intense stares and hushed whispers. The judge hadn't returned yet, but Marshal Griggs had. He looked pale. His phone remained in his hand, fingers frozen over the screen, unread messages piling up. Pam sat down silently, pulling out one final document from her briefcase, a sealed motion. 10 minutes later, Judge Engelmayer returned. This time, no grin. No sarcasm. Just a long, calculating look across the courtroom. He cleared his throat. This court has reviewed new material evidence provided by plaintiff's counsel. Based on the preliminary findings, the court is placing the defense's lead counsel and agency representatives on notice. Further hearings may include perjury and contempt proceedings. A collective murmur rippled through the gallery. Griggs shifted uncomfortably. Pam stood again. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to submit this motion, requesting immediate injunctive relief for my client based on whistleblower retaliation, and a protective order against the agency's ongoing surveillance efforts. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Engelmayer took the sealed motion from her hands and opened it. His brow furrowed deeper with each page. After several tense minutes, he looked up. Motion is granted. Effective immediately. Now it was Bondi's turn to speak softly, but with weight. Thank you, Your Honor. My client can finally breathe for the first time in months. Engelmayer nodded, slowly, as if processing the fact that he, the judge who once mocked her, had just been legally cornered. Court adjourned for the day. We reconvene Friday. Bring your top people. As the gavel slammed down, Pam turned and calmly walked out, the courtroom stunned, the press sprinting after her, and Judge Engelmayer left staring at a legal ambush he never saw coming. By the time Pam Bondi exited the courthouse steps, a dozen microphones and cameras had already crowded the sidewalk. Reporters clamored for her attention, but she paused only briefly. All I'll say is this, truth has a way of cutting through noise. The rest will unfold where it belongs, in court. She walked straight past them, not one word wasted. Inside the courthouse, however, the impact was only beginning to set in. Judge Engelmayer returned to his chambers, visibly rattled. The affidavit, the flash drive, it was all corroborating a dangerous pattern. Someone had suppressed key evidence. And someone had made him, unknowingly, complicit. He picked up his office phone and called down to the clerk's office. "I want a full audit of discovery logs from the last 60 days, and I want it now." Meanwhile, in the agency headquarters across town, panic was already taking root. In a corner office, Frederick Langley, the agency's general counsel, had just received a secure text. It read, "Bondi has the affidavit. She used it. Injunction granted. Prepare for exposure." Langley stood from his desk, jaw tightening. He glanced at a folder marked "Intercepted" sitting beside his monitor. Then, with visible frustration, he slammed it shut and grabbed his coat. At that same moment, Pam was riding silently in a black town car, heading back to her office. She didn't check her phone. She didn't celebrate. She simply opened her binder, slid the motion back into place, and whispered to herself, "One strike. Now watch them scramble." But this legal chess game wasn't over. Not yet. At the federal agency's headquarters, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Emails were flying. Phones ringing. The internal legal team was already in emergency session behind closed doors. Frederick Langley stormed in, tossing his coat over a chair. "How the hell did Bondi get that affidavit?" he snapped. No one answered. Deputy Counsel Mira Henley stood slowly. "It was buried in sealed correspondence." "You said it was handled." Langley's face turned red. "It was supposed to stay buried. Someone inside leaked it, and now she's using it like a sword." Across town, Pam Bondi entered her D.C. office. Her small legal team, a trusted circle of sharp, quiet professionals, was already waiting. One of them handed her a freshly printed stack of documents. "Langley's team is panicking," her investigator, Roman, said. "We tapped into some public feeds and internal agency chatter. They're lawyering up hard." Pam nodded, flipping through the reports. "They'll try to discredit the affidavit. Or me. Or both." Her assistant, Clara, interjected. "We're already seeing talking heads on morning cable spinning it as political theater. They don't realize the metadata confirms Langley read that affidavit himself." Pam looked up. "Then we released the email chain. Quietly. Through a leak. No fingerprints." Clara hesitated. "To the press?" "No," Pam said. "To Congress. One member. Someone who won't sit on it." She stood, voice steady. "Langley buried the truth. I'm about to bury his credibility." Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. The storm, literal and political, was building fast. The next morning, a sealed manila envelope was delivered, not to a newsroom, but to the office of Representative Lydia Corrales, a junior congresswoman known for two things: an iron spine and zero tolerance for government cover-ups. Inside the envelope, the original affidavit Pam had submitted in court, a copy of the internal email where Langley acknowledged its existence, the metadata printout proving he received it, and forwarded it to an unknown, secured archive. Corrales read every line. Then she locked the door, picked up her phone, and made one call. "Bring in oversight. We're going to war." Within hours, the Oversight Committee scheduled an emergency inquiry. Quietly. Off the books, but the signal was clear. Someone at the top had lied, and someone underneath had just handed them the key to unlock it all. Back in the courthouse, Judge Engelmayer convened a private meeting with the U.S. Marshal's office. "I need 2 agents in court on Friday. No announcements. Just be present." The judge had seen enough. He was preparing for the possibility that criminal referrals might arise, not from Pam Bondi, but from his own courtroom. Meanwhile, Pam sat alone in her office, sipping cold coffee. She stared out the window at the Capitol dome in the distance. Roman stepped in quietly. Corrales took the bait. She's lighting it up inside the Oversight Committee. Pam didn't smile. Good. I don't want a media storm. I want accountability. He handed her another file. Then you're going to like this. Surveillance logs show Langley met privately with one of the DOJ deputy chiefs last week, off record, no security detail, no logs. Pam flipped the folder open, absorbing it in silence. Then, he's trying to cut a deal before the floor drops out. She stood. Then we'll make sure it does. By Thursday morning, the storm had fully arrived. The Oversight Committee had quietly issued a request for internal communications from the agency, specifically anything involving Frederick Langley and the now infamous affidavit. Rumors were spreading through federal offices like wildfire. Langley, knowing his options were narrowing, made his move. That afternoon, he arrived at the Department of Justice through a side entrance, escorted not by security, but by his private attorney. Inside, he sat across from a senior deputy attorney general, voice low, palms open. If I cooperate, Langley said, I want protection. I name names, you cut immunity. But what he didn't know, not yet, was that Representative Lydia Corrales had already shared the email metadata with the Judiciary Subcommittee. And the moment Langley walked into DOJ, the committee chair received a quiet ping. Across town, Pam Bondi sat calmly in her office as Roman brought in the latest update. Langley's at Justice. He's cracking. Pam barely looked up. He doesn't realize it's already too late. She pulled a sealed envelope from her briefcase. Deliver this to Judge Engelmayer's chambers before close of business. It contains my final motion. Roman raised an eyebrow. Final? As in the last piece of the puzzle, Pam said. Everything he buried. The timeline. The proof. The attempt to obstruct the court. It's all there, neatly packaged. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the Capitol and floodlights bathed the courthouse in gold, a single file landed on Judge Engelmayer's desk. He read through it slowly, each page dragging him deeper into the unmistakable truth: Langley had committed perjury. And Bondi had just cornered every last defense. He didn't speak to anyone that night. But his law clerk reported seeing him at his desk past midnight, staring silently at a single line in the final motion. Even when justice hides behind marble walls, it must still answer to truth. Friday morning arrived under heavy skies. The courthouse in D.C. buzzed with quiet tension. Reporters, clerks, federal aides, and legal observers all knew something big was about to unfold. But no one knew just how far it would go. Pam Bondi walked through the courthouse doors like a surgeon headed into a high-stakes operation, precise, calm, and unshaken. Inside Courtroom 26B, the air was different now. The laughter that had once echoed through these walls was gone. The defense table sat stiff and silent. Frederick Langley, normally smug and composed, looked exhausted, pale, collar unbuttoned, no tie. Judge Engelmayer entered promptly at 9 a.m., the courtroom rising with him. He gave no greeting. He didn't look at either side. He simply began. This court has reviewed substantial new evidence presented by plaintiff's counsel, Ms. Bondi, including a verified affidavit, corroborating internal communications, and evidence of deliberate concealment of material facts. Langley's attorney fidgeted. The court further confirms that the document in question was not only valid, it was withheld from discovery and misrepresented in sworn testimony. This is a direct violation of federal court procedure. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Pam stood calmly, hands folded in front of her. Judge Engelmayer paused, then continued, as such, I am referring Mr. Frederick Langley to the U.S. Attorney's Office for investigation into obstruction and potential perjury. Furthermore, the agency's legal counsel will be placed under temporary injunction from engaging in any further contact with the plaintiff or his representation until this matter is resolved. Langley's jaw clenched. He didn't speak. But Judge Engelmayer wasn't done. Lastly, This court formally apologizes to Ms. Bondi and her client for the dismissive conduct that occurred at the onset of this case. I permitted tone to override merit. That will not happen again. The courtroom froze. Pam gave a single nod, no gloating, no grin. Just resolve. She turned to her client, sitting quietly behind her, and whispered, "We did it." But in the press gallery, a reporter mouthed what the entire room was now thinking: she didn't just win. She flipped the entire system on its head. The ruling sent immediate shockwaves through Washington. Within hours, news outlets plastered headlines across every platform: Federal Judge refers Agency Counsel for Criminal Investigation, Bondi triggers system shakeup. Pam Bondi, though bombarded by calls and interview requests, remained quiet. She released only a short written statement: "Today's ruling is not a personal victory. It is a reminder that the law exists to protect truth, not power." Meanwhile, inside the federal agency, chaos reigned. Langley was escorted out of the building by internal security. Staffers watched in stunned silence as their once untouchable legal chief walked past with empty hands and no words. The Oversight Committee, emboldened by the court's findings, announced formal hearings into the agency's conduct, including potential criminal referrals for those involved in the attempted suppression of evidence. Judge Engelmayer, for his part, had returned to chambers with a weight lifted, but his tone in private was deeply introspective. "I underestimated her," he said to his law clerk that evening. "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard." Behind the scenes, Pam's legal team was already preparing for Phase 2, restitution for her client, whistleblower protections, and possible sanctions against the agency. But something else was happening, too, quietly. Staffers from other federal departments had begun reaching out to her office. Whispered calls. Requests for meetings. Not about this case, about their own. About what they'd seen. About what they'd buried. Pam had shattered a barrier. And others were starting to see the cracks. Weeks later, Courtroom 26B looked very different. Gone was the smugness, the underestimation, the performative ridicule. In its place, discipline. Precision. Respect. Pam Bondi had changed the tone of the federal legal arena, not through noise, but through strategy, truth, and the kind of professionalism that couldn't be denied, even by her sharpest critics. Her client, now fully protected under federal whistleblower statutes, had returned to private life, safe, respected, and finally heard. Langley, meanwhile, faced formal charges. Depositions revealed a pattern of document suppression, manipulation of legal channels, and private communications aimed at stalling internal accountability. The Oversight Committee hearings, televised and watched by millions, laid bare the rot that had festered behind polished titles and sealed briefings. But it all started with a woman who refused to flinch when she was laughed at in open court. And Judge Engelmayer? He presided over every remaining hearing in the case with a visible change in demeanor. His rulings became more precise. His courtroom, once casual and mocking, had grown quiet, focused. Months later, at a private legal symposium, he was asked about the turning point in the case. He paused before answering. There was no outburst. No grandstanding. She simply placed a single document on the table, and the truth did the rest. Pam Bondi never spoke publicly about the moment she destroyed a federal judge with one legal masterstroke. She didn't need to. The courts remembered. The agencies remembered. And most of all, the country took notice.